Today we celebrate a number of things. We celebrate the presentation of Jesus in the temple, of course, 40 days after his birth. We celebrate the purification of Mary, which was required by church law. And we also celebrate Candlemas. And so we start at the end and we'll go back to the beginning. With respect to the candles, this became a tradition in antiquity of the church, that because Simeon says he has seen the light to the Gentiles, to the nations, the hoi polloi, that he has seen this salvation come. Light was a very important symbol in the ancient world. And so, if we take the flame from one candle, you light the whole church from the one candle, and the original flame is never diminished. So light was a very important symbol. And so on the day of the presentation of Jesus, on the purification of Mary, they would bring all their candles to be used throughout the year. Now, we have electricity, so candles aren't such an issue. But for them, candles was their form of light throughout the year. And everything they wanted to be sanctified. Their whole lives were sacramentalized. Everything they did was ritual and had to do with their Christian faith. And so they essentially brought their light bulbs into the church at this time of year to have them blessed, so that throughout the year, the light that would be brought in their home would originate here with the light of Christ. And so that's why we celebrate this Candlemas. Now, tomorrow we celebrate the Feast of St. Blaise, and we use those candles that were blessed to bless the throats and actually the physical body of anyone who comes for that blessing. The next thing, we talk about the purification. And so in Jewish law, it was written that a woman, after giving birth to the child, was unclean for 40 days. She was unclean because of, the birth and the fluids and the blood and everything else. At a very practical level, they knew that pathogens at that point often traveled through the blood. So you couldn't touch a dead body without being unclean. You couldn't deliver a baby without being unclean. And so the ritual 40 days was almost like keeping people away from everyone else. You kept them away just in case. And I think also, in another sense, it was kind of saying to the mother, don't do anything for 40 days. You're going to be taking care of this newborn baby. So you have no obligations really in public for 40 days. You don't have to go to synagogue. You don't have to be in the temple. You don't have to participate in the feast. Take care of your child. So I think it was a very practical thing. What's important to note is that Mary and Joseph followed these prescriptions, even though they knew they were the father and mother of the Messiah. That they could have easily said, well, we don't have to do this stuff anymore. We're the parents of Jesus. But they didn't. And that's the reason why they were the parents of Jesus. They were so devout. Their faith was, inculcated in everything they did. Everything they did had to do with the faith. And so they followed the prescriptions as well. Mary retained her virginity, and yet she still goes through the 40 days of purification. And so finally, the presentation. Now, originally the presentation was celebrated on Valentine's Day, February 14th. And the reason was, Christmas was not yet set in the Roman calendar, but Epiphany was, which is why in some places, even now in Central and South America, Epiphany is a much greater celebration than Christmas is to them. Because Epiphany is the first time that Jesus is seen. He's manifested. And so what they did is they took the Feast of the Epiphany, they counted 40 days from that, which is around February 14th, and then they would celebrate that presentation. As soon as we decided about the 4th century that Christmas is to occur on the day of the unconquered sun, or Sol Invictus, which is December 25th, then they moved the feast back to coincide with his birth. But I think if we didn't understand the import of the presentation of Jesus, that like the people back then, we might have missed it. So we go back a few years to 587 BC. 587 BC, when Jerusalem is sacked, and the temple is torn down, and the abominating sacrilege is placed in the temple, and the Babylonians take the Israelites into exile. Now, during that time, they had the Holy of Holies, And there was the Ark of the Covenant. We've all seen it with the angels on top and the box and everything else. And it had within it the law. So it had the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. It had Aaron's staff. It had some manna as a sample of that. And they believed that they had the Shekinah, the presence of God within that ark. And when the Babylonians came in and they sacked Jerusalem and they tore down the temple, legend has it they also stole that ark. Now some people will say, well no, Jeremiah hid it somewhere in the mountain and nobody knows where. Or maybe the Israelites hid it. Or maybe the priestly class near the Dead Sea or whatever, they hid it. Somebody hid this and nobody's found it. Thus we have the raiders of the lost ark. They're looking for it. Everybody's looking for it. So from 587 on, there was no presence of God in the temple. Now, granted, they would say, no, we feel the presence of God there. They still have the priestly duties and everything else. But there was no ark. There was no, for us, it would be the tabernacle. If someone took the tabernacle out of the church and the Lord was not here, it would be just a church building. And that's how they looked at the temple. So for all these years, it's empty. Well, now, jump up to the present day for them. You have Simeon and Anna in the temple. And they are waiting for the day that the ark is going to be found. They're waiting for the day that the Holy of Holies will finally be brought back to the temple and everything will be right again. Which is why the presentation is so important. Mary will come to be called the Ark of the Covenant. Why? Because the Ark of the Covenant carried within it the law. The Ark of the Covenant carried within it the Shekinah, the presence of God. The Ark of the Covenant carried within it manna, the bread from heaven. And Mary carries within her all those things. So the presentation is so important because as Mary and Joseph are journeying to Jerusalem and they're climbing up the mount to go to the temple, the Ark of the Covenant and the presence of God is returning to the temple. This is what Simeon and Anna have been waiting for, but not like they thought. Not like they thought it would happen. As this humble couple approaches the temple, and they bring with them the Shekinah, the very presence of God. And they follow the prescribed offering. They offer these 2 turtle doves. It had to be turtle doves because that was for poor people. In fact, Mary and Joseph are often symbolized as 2 turtle doves. Note here that they were not seahawks, or what some would call ospreys. Seahawks are violent predators. In fact, they have far-reaching sight because they are predatory birds. They can look far ahead, they can see their quarry, they can go sometimes several yards beyond the surface of the water to capture. But they're also defenders. If you try and get near their nests, they are ruthless defenders. It's very violent that way. But I digress. We're talking about turtle doves. So the turtle doves were offered in place of the firstborn. So remember, we go back, it's the last plague in Egypt, all the firstborn males are killed, and therefore from that point on, the Israelites must offer their firstborn. I mean, this is a person they have to offer, unless they offer an animal in its place. And you can offer anything from a donkey down to a sheep, but the fact is, if you were poor, you offered the turtle doves. They followed all the prescriptions of the law. And I shudder to think, of all the people who could have been at the temple at that time, it was just Simeon and Anna, because they were there waiting and waiting. I wonder if people knew what was happening, that the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God was coming back, if they would not wait also. And that's what we have here. That's what we have. Sometimes we think of it as, oh, I have to go to Mass today. Or I have to serve Mass, or I have to be there. No, we get to be here. And we are within the presence of God. That we have the Holy of Holies right here before us. And in fact, in some churches, they used to have the little curtain, the veil over it, to hide that Holy of Holies. So that even when the tabernacle was open, it was kind of veiled a little bit. So if we have the Holy of Holies here, and we have the Shekinah, and we have the law, and we have the bread from heaven, why aren't we here? Because we are like these unpredictable, stubborn horses that are sometimes called broncos in history. They would buck the rider. They couldn't be tamed. They were stubborn. They were unpredictable. You never knew what they were going to do, but they could run. They were fast. We too have that same mentality. We can get a lot of things done. We can run around like crazy people. We can be stubborn. And we can buck when the Lord wants to say, let me take the reins for a little while. See, the presentation is more than just another day. It's more than a time to get candles blessed. And even for Mary, it was more than just a day, okay, now I can be involved in the public again. At the presentation, we celebrate again our own baptism. Our baptism when we were given a candle. Our baptism when we were purified of original sin. And our baptism at which time we too were offered by our parents to God. We did not have to sacrifice turtle doves or a lamb, because the sacrifice was made by Him. The only proper response to a presentation like that, to a present like that, is gratitude.